Next up, we have Karl Bickmore from SnapTech IT. The floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Robert. Good to see you, buddy.
Bye.
Okay, well, I was going to Google great TV shows about SZA, but it just went to my RSS feed, so I don't know what to do with that. So. Oh, man, I got a couple laughs, so it's not bad. All right, so I'm Karl Bickmore, CEO of SnapTech IT. I'm also the CEO of Raven Automation. SnapTech IT is my baby that I was part of founding and creating many years ago. I hail from the Phoenix market. Brian Blakely and I met a long time ago when he was still running an MSP, and we just decided to grab lunch one day, and so we've kind of known each other through the years and been trading off notes for a long time. So it's really fun to be at a place with him here. The other thing that's great is this is a really great community. I love the vendor agnostic nature of this. I've been a long time proponent of the ConnectWise community. I get a lot out of that, but I see people here and I see vendors here I don't see anywhere else. And so it's so much more of a rich experience for me to meet and see, but I also see a lot of friends that I know, and at least they all do me the courtesy of pretending they're going to come watch my presentation. So I appreciate that, everybody. So oh yeah, I'll be there. You bet. All right, great. Yeah. It was fun. I've been a friend of Andrew Morgan's for a long time. Andrew, thank you, buddy. And so when he calls, you answer. And this is really the brainchild of Andrew, Ryan, and Brian this year. And I was asked to talk about the secure onboarding. And as I was beginning to think about that, I was thinking about, well, what is it I'm going to say about that, and how does that go for an hour? Oh, just kidding. But we'll see what you guys have to say. I think actually, it was kind of a whim the other day when I got on the app and I set up a poll about my session. I'm like, oh, there's a thing, I'll just do that. What is that? And we'll see if anybody answers it. I think I'm over 220 answers now, so thank you. Great engagement, everybody. And it's exciting to see the results. I'll say just a high level, they're across the board. Nobody is really doing this the same way. But I want to tell you just a little bit about, well, a couple of things I do. I am a member of the Entrepreneur Organization, EO as some call it. I serve on the board of the Arizona chapter, worldwide entrepreneur organization, nothing to do with IT. It's just about being an entrepreneur. I really enjoyed that journey, so if you ever wanted to ask more questions about that, I'm happy to share. It's just another peer group that we participate in. I'm also a wannabe rocker. I noticed when I put the interest into music, a few other people said yes on that as well. I also have some fun notes here. So, in this business track, well, first of all, just to remind you that you can add questions, get to the microphones if there's something you want to talk about. I'm sure I'm going to say some things you disagree with because a lot of us like to do this differently. And so let's talk it out. I love to go back and forth and we can say who has what when the time comes. At any rate, this is a business presentation, business track, business owners. It should speak to the business modeling, the methodology, and how we go about this. I, too, am a big fan of what Brian had to say this morning. I think he's more like a Zen master or something. I think of like that kid in the Matrix saying, the problem is you think there is a spoon. There's no spoon. And so I'm like, your problem is you think it's your business you should talk about. Your business has nothing to do with it. All right? And so a couple of quick highlights. I love that he's talked about authentic interest in helping them. That rings true to me. Speaking their language, not a product, but a practice. Think through the document, the ideal client profile. Data flow diagrams as a visual aid, not the really super nerdy one that we do later to hand in for compliance or to teach all of our IT people about something. Avoid FUD. Do your homework, build rapport. So I thought that was some really great things to think about. So in this business track, we're thinking, okay, there's this fictional company or organization. I can't remember if it was a company or it might have been something modeled after like the city of Santa Barbara. Chris could tell us. It might look similar to some of the things he's doing. And so we're all thinking like, how would we present to a customer like this when we're talking about this business track? And so from my perspective, Brian did a great job of meeting the customer, finding out their needs, and he got an MSA signed. And with that MSA, maybe that had the statement of work, maybe it had the assessment sold, and it probably had some other services sold in it. But I just want to take just a minute to talk about MSA sign for just a minute. There are a lot of different camps on how this works. But if you haven't gotten to that model where you have a master service agreement that has really good terms and conditions that says things like you're going to charge for offboarding and you're going to have late fees, or you're not responsible for their data. There's a lot of good things you can put into the MSA that will really help. And I'll say from my perspective, I sign up to the school of thought that says you sell assessment, you do assessment, you provide great value in assessment, and then you sell ongoing services. So that's my perspective. I think it's just as legitimate to say, hey, I'm just going to sell services, and assessment's one of the first things we do, which I think a lot of folks approach it that way as well. And so, hey, that's a different sales cycle, a different approach. One of the advantages, I would say, of the assessment methodology is when I'm putting the MSA and the assessment proposal in front of the client, I get a lot less red lines, a lot less questions. And then when we go to sell the managed agreement, the cybersecurity agreements, and all the other agreements that we want them to sell as just statement of works attached to the MSA, we're not revisiting it again. And so it's pretty cool in that sense that we just don't get a lot of conversations about our MSAs for whatever reason, where we used to when we were selling kind of everything all in one package. So that's just something I thought I would tell you about a little bit. So a little bit more about me. I'm just that stupid IT guy that was working in an IT job. In fact, I even when I was 23, I think I started working at a college, writing computer information security curriculum. I didn't have a degree, but I got hired to do the job. So I was like, okay, cool. And I had a little young family, and I found myself suddenly going like, hey, maybe I do have this like entrepreneurial. People keep asking me for help. So, I'm just the product of that side gig that turned into the full-time gig. And then I went through and made every mistake. I'm essentially you, but maybe been doing it a little longer or not as long. I don't know. We'll see. But I could just as easily be in the audience here listening to somebody else tell a great talk about securing onboarding or how to do the onboarding practice. But from my perspective, when I think of onboarding, I think I've already got an executed MSA, and I think I've already got a lot of details that tell me about the onboarding from an assessment, right? And then I already have an onboarding project plan that came from a template that's been uniquely built and customized to that customer. So that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about on the practices today, is what does that mean on the assessment. Now, the documents that I hear are still pending for the takeaways. The takeaways that I've left for my talk for you are some details about how we think about assessments. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit because it's really important to me what I get out of that assessment and how that works, and actually how it's a great tool to help us sell the longer, bigger, better deal as we go. And then I'm also providing like sanitized versions of our onboarding template. So there's document for that. And in fact, I also collaborated with Tim, who's doing the one on offboarding, and contributed our MSA language about charging for offboarding, and contributed our template for that as well. I'm sure that influenced his takeaway as well. So at any rate, the concept is how are we going to do a good and a secure offboarding? And I'm coming from a perspective that I've got these things already ready to go. So once again, start thinking about questions you might have. So this is my journey on assessments. At first, I was like, you want to buy stuff from me? I'll sell you stuff. Let's go. And I didn't do assessments. And I said, I don't know what to charge, this amount. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I should charge per workstation, then per user. I had all these notions or ideas, but pretty early on in the development of me building my MSP, I came up with the concept that I want to do this thing called a risk assessment. I didn't formally know what that was. I just knew I wanted to get in there and figure out stuff that could be costing me money, because I kept bringing on customers, and there's all these little surprises that I then had to go back and resell and re-talk to them about, or suddenly I'm just losing my shirt on this deal, and I just did a bad job of it. So it was just as much for the client's benefit as it was for mine. So when we first started, we just had a set of general questions. This is like in 2012, pretty early on for me. And we kind of did them a little differently. We weren't that process-driven on how we did it. And so this one we might think, oh, let's check in on this. Oh, let's think about that. Then we came across the idea of making it more process-driven, more systematized. And then we came across this thing called an SCSF. We're like, oh, this is a really great way to think about a framework. It was like, mind blown. Oh, what just happened? And so we involved our own questions to be based on the categories of the cybersecurity framework. So suddenly we found ourselves really thinking about all the way from left of boom to right of boom and all those things, and really talking to our customers about it in a meaningful way. And so that was the next step of the assessments that we started selling and doing as we were looking for new clients. Then that evolved into a more detailed discovery using the CSF categories, and it got to be about 170 questions we were asking and finding out that I was gonna know once that customer was sold. But it also was really good information for the customer, and we found that this worked well for customers that were really interested or that had a compliance background, and so we started finding ourselves into more of those kind of clients. But this whole process went from there, and then I think more recently, as 2022, we started saying, hey, this one-size-fits-all approach is problematic. So maybe all you guys already know this, right? So I'm slow. It took me like 10 years to figure this out. But the practice of saying, okay, maybe not every client needs exactly the same question, because going to this 30-person law firm with this 170 question and very expensive assessment may not be what we want. And it may not be as important to them. And so inspired by CIS and the implementation groups, we figured out a way of thinking of our customers sort of in 4 different categories on assessments. We're still using the NIST framework because it's still the most comprehensive way to go all the way from left to right, or all the way from identify to recover, right, if you will. But we started thinking of the amount of questions and the type of question we asked based on these implementation groups. That also changed the scope, it changed the price of the assessment, and it met the customer's specific desire of what they wanted, if that makes sense. And so that's where we're at today. And so, if you have questions about that, I can answer more of those. I did provide a handout where we explain the mentality of the client at each of those 4 levels, the types of things they're looking for, and I also explained our base hours that we use to sell the assessment. And so that's going to change. One thing you'll also learn, and we've learned this just along the way by going to things like this and listening and participating in things like service leadership studies and looking at the behaviors of the higher mature MSPs that are more profitable and growing faster. We learned that it's good to actually customize and scope as you go specific to the need. And so I think of if it's a 20-hour assessment, I think that's the starting of the conversation, but there might be things that we get into that make us think it's a different scope. And so a level 1 assessment might be 20 hours, but maybe for this customer that level 1's 30 hours, or it's 10 hours. Well, not 10. I've never really done it less than like 15, or 10's tight. The other key thing is, and we'll talk about this is from business decision standpoint, I say I really got into the mode of always charging for all of these things, assessments, onboarding, and offboarding, really kind of after I had one of those really horrible things. Because there was this time that I was doing fixed cost onboardings or fixed cost projects too. And I had this client that we had a 60-hour onboarding project with. Now, it was a good-sized client. It had like 70, 80 users, but they were a 24/7 shop and 7 locations, tow truck company, all over the valley in the Phoenix area. And we also wrapped in hey, they want to switch their ISP out, so they're going to CenturyLink, now called Lumen, was Quest, whichever. I don't know how many of you have done a 7-location ISP switch for a large vendor like that. Anybody? A few hands up. Anybody freaked out that we said we were going to do this onboarding with that for 60 hours? You should have been. That project, that project landed at 450 hours 2 years later. Yeah, whoa, indeed. And I said, you know what, this is crazy. I'm not doing that again. In reality of it is the meaningful stuff in the onboarding happened actually pretty normally and pretty okay. It was the constant barrage and testing and mistakes made with a ISP cut over from the worst place ever. And so it really made me question, and that's why I started asking the questions about how do I charge and why and what do I do? And that's where I really developed this mentality of I just got to maintain margin everywhere I go, or else I can't staff and I can't deliver the service that are needed. And so that's why we got into this modality, and that's why we do it the way that we do it. So. And also, it's just fun to share, what do we do? I'm sanitizing this for the sake of everybody has their number one tool. If you want to grab me on the side and say, well, what is your specific mix of things, I'm happy to share. But we use a vulnerability scanner. We do network discovery. We do internal, external scanning. We're making sure that we're doing good thorough scanning of their Office 365 or Workspace comes up sometimes, but it's almost always Office 365 with us. And we have a custom assessment tool for our questions that are categorized, but it also has the benefit of setting a baseline so that when they become a customer and as we improve things, we can tick it off and it shows the variance from assessment to the next QBR to the next QBR, constantly giving them a deployment score or a rating score in each of the CSF categories, which is really nice. Not terribly hard to set up. There are several tools out there that can help you with that, but that's been a really key element to our delivering assessments in a very process-driven, consistent way, making sure all the questions are answered in the same way. And then also, I really like what Brian had to say about getting that conversation where you're asking really simple questions like, how do you make money? And what is it that you actually do? And how does that happen? And what application? And so a big part of our assessment isn't the tool set, it's the interviews that we do. And we do it with key stakeholders, which is oftentimes maybe the point of contact, but it's also an executive, it's also a frontline worker. We have a few folks that we have a really specific set of questions we're asking that's going to help us really characterize the specific need, where the problems are, what their opinion of IT is, what they see as strengths and weaknesses, so forth, so on. And we're taking pictures to help the team know as well. So that's a little bit about our tool share. So what am I going to get out of the assessment? It's a lot. It's usually many, many pages. We're building it out. We happen to use one of the many documentation systems like many of us do. And in there, we're building it out like they're going to be a customer even if they don't sign up because it's just a good way to go. And so we're filling out things in the assessment about their network diagrams, their data flow. We're building out a roadmap. That's part of our delivery of our assessment is a 2-year roadmap or longer if they want more. We also have many best practices, applications, passwords, things that we know. We are building that out during the assessment. And so we're going to walk in with a lot of things, including a proposal for services, and our main delivery is an hour-and-a-half executive meeting with stakeholders. And on our assessment scope of work, it requires that all stakeholders are there and present in that meeting, which is an interesting conversation, but I found that that's definitely the most effective way to get it not only from good delivery, but also to the next cell, which is important as well. So that's a little bit about our theory of assessments. So if you have questions about that or different opinions, I'd love to hear it. Okay, so I have a story to tell. Sometimes people say, well, what does it mean to be secure in your onboarding? So I think this was, I'm going to say somewhere in the 2016, 2017 era. We have a location in the Atlanta, Georgia location. I'm out of Phoenix. And we also have some folks in California and whatnot. Anyway, we brought on a really nice big client. Somebody, all of you would know, you've probably been to one of their retail locations. We were handling the IT services for their corporate office, which is around 250 people, a large data center area, and then their retail locations, well over 1,000 across lots of places. Anyway, big company, big onboarding project, and so we're just getting our way through it. We've deployed our very fancy EDR solution. We're in there putting accounts in. Our RMM agents are rolled out, and it's taking a while, and it was meant to take a while. This onboarding is going to be a 3-6 month onboarding to get done, and we're somewhere in month 3, and we're starting to put our firewalls in place in the data center, which they kind of kept delaying because we had a lot of them to do, and it's complicated, a lot going on. And then there came the day where we finally, about 4 months in, deployed our threat detection solution. Well, that was an exciting day. So upon deploying the threat detection, we instantly found active adversary on just about every computer, spinning up on unusual services. We're seeing lateral movement between systems. Holy smokes, this client has been compromised, and we've been in here with our tools, with our remote control, with our RMM, putting our accounts in there, for our technicians and whatnot, because we do named accounts, not shared accounts, and so we've got them in there, and we're sitting here going, okay, this is bad for the client, but what are the implications to us? So we're immediately like, how many of our customers do we need to now go look at? And well, the answer was all of them, right? And so as that process moved on and on, we started finding ways that we could remediate, but we got incident response involved, got their insurance involved, legal involved. More teams came into the process. Took several months to work through the full incident response, and it was crazy because there were so many retail locations or just remote workers that all it took was us to, do some defense here and there, and then some laptop that hasn't been on for 2 weeks suddenly comes online, has it, and suddenly it's trying to spread again, right? And and the thing about this is like, look, we had a fully configured secure firewall that really does a good job and a really great endpoint protection platform that's really highly reputable in place, but it caught none of this activity. Why is that? Well, because it wasn't malware, and until we had detection in place, we didn't see any of this activity. It looked like IT behavior, starting services, scripts executing, so forth, so on. Well, we did end up getting to the other side of it, and thankfully for us, there wasn't a huge amount of blowback specifically, but you can imagine how we felt about onboarding after that experience. There's nothing quite like having that fear of, did all my clients just get compromised? How deep and far and wide? It says, we're well aware our tools have been out there for months with an active adversary. In fact, it was October when we found this out, and when it was all said and done, after we had the forensic people involved, that adversary had been in there since April, and they had been working the credit cards. So this wasn't a ransomware attack. They were simply skimming information, getting the credit cards, and taking advantage of which, because this client has many retail locations, was thousands and thousands of credit cards. What a treasure trove that was for them, I'm sure. And so what did we learn? Well, we used to always do our assessment like, well, let's get our agents out there and make that happen. Let's get to the threat detection after we've done all this foundational stuff. That's like the finishing stuff, right? That's what we used to do. We used to go through the Active Directory kind of after these other things, let's get to service and get things going, then we'll clean up the Active Directory. We would look at the Office 365 security as that extra remediation process. We'd actually start that after onboarding. And so you can imagine that shifted our mindset on the timing quite a bit. And so what do we do now? We assume that client is already infected, always, before we do anything in their network. And what did that lead to? Well, we started having like secondary, non-connected, unrelated remote control services that we could use for assessment and or initial onboarding tasks. Threat detection goes in first, not last. The whole mentality came to how can we watch and know what's happening before we get into a mess? And so those are really the things that we learned. And as far as, secure onboarding is concerned, I think that's probably just the biggest thing I can say about it. Assume breach. And if you assume breach, you'll behave differently. You might think of different solutions. Some of your processes may take longer. You might need to have a little more tool spend here and there, which I would charge for. But those are the things that make it better. All right. So that being said, moving on to the business side, one thing I think is important to understand, like when I think business side, I'm not thinking about the technology specifically. I'm thinking about a couple of major levers. And I talk to customers about this all the time. I think as a business owner, I care about profit, and I care about risk, which is preserving profit, if you will, or preserving the company, what we have so far. And so when I think about those two risks out there, those two levers out there in any business, that's a great way to help a company understand where technology can fit in and why I think about assessments the way I do. If I include assessments as part of my thing, then I have to raise my other rates in order for it to maintain profitability. Many of you probably do that. That's what the poll is telling me. But many of you don't. And so that's just an interesting question, because what happens when you have 5 or 6 onboardings going on simultaneously, or 10 or 12, which we do have from time to time? We got these clients coming on, and this one doesn't quite get done in the 2.5, 3 weeks we target, so they're going to overlap, and now this other one's starting. And now how are you going to staff and keep that profitable? The hit becomes bigger the bigger you get, right? And so I think the key thing is if you want to have good, dedicated team members that do just projects or just onboarding or experts in security, if you want to build the teams that have all these components that can work together, you have to charge for it. At least that's how I feel about it, so that you can afford to pay for it. And the reality of it is I think the biggest barrier to this is just being better at sales, more willing and more confident to ask. It's a funny thing. Like I learned a big lesson. This is a Gary Pika lesson. Gary's the master at teaching us all this. I had a new product that I wanted to sell customers. It's only a couple of bucks a month, and so it's really easy to sell it to new customers because they come on board and it's just part of what you do. Yeah, and this is an offering. You take this, we do this, so forth, so on. But how do you get it sold to that long, extended base that you've been selling to for the last 10 years? Well, you got to go have individual conversations. So what I was doing is like every QBR, we bring it up. But then we just couldn't quite get the penetration. So what did I do? Well, it was at a Boom 2 years ago, I think. A guy's like, oh, I just send everybody a letter saying you're getting this unless you tell me you don't. I was like, oh man, I'm such an idiot. I could be so much better at sales, you know. And so we did it. And you want to know how many customers objected to that added product? One, almost zero, one. And that's it. It's like, so instantly that product is now everywhere. Stack alignment is great, right? This is a very real problem that so what was the problem? Me getting my head around it. Thinking that the customer doesn't want to pay for this, or not wanting to justify this, or not being confident, or asking to, I don't know. Look, I never want to sell something to somebody that they don't want, or that they don't need. Maybe don't want is not exactly right. But if they don't need it, I don't want to sell it to them. But do I think they need it? Well, yeah, if it's in my stack, I do. And so what do? You know, I'm not all here to push it or anything. It's just, I just think it's a key element of understanding. I think generally as MSPs, I speak to this myself, we're bad at sales. And that's why we don't sell onboarding or assessments, or we don't charge for offboarding, because we don't want to have the fight, we don't want to deal with the objections, or we don't want to explain it. I don't know. That was how it was for me, right? There are, I'm sure, great ways to cover and do it otherwise. Just real quick, I'm going to open up the poll from the app and just give you guys some of the numbers I saw. So here at the end, as I'm bringing up 221 responses. I still can't believe it. That was way more than I expected. Oh, 265, sorry, just updated. So I asked the question, how do you charge? And it said, well, we charge for all three, onboarding, assessment, and offboarding, and we charge the actual amount of hours at our full rate. Okay, to me, that's the most margin-preserving version that you can do, right? That's going to be the most profitable, one of your levers, right? And 37 out of 265 do that. So that's what, a little over 15% of us, right? That's a pretty low percentage. That tracks pretty close to what I learned in service leadership that says the top quartile of the fastest growing, most profitable MSPs do that. The next question, we charge fixed fee amounts, and sometimes it works out profitably and sometimes it doesn't. That would be like the scale of 1 to 5 on maturity level. This is according to service leadership. This is opinion, not fact, right? 5 would be you sell full rate that I just mentioned. 3 is the fixed rate, like we'll charge 1 month worth of managed services for your onboarding. Or 2 months if you're looking to raise it, and you kind of have that. And then a lot of times it works out. Sometimes it even works out better than what you would have charged, or sometimes you lose on that, right? Not terrible, just a different way of approaching it. Another answer is we see these activities as a way of getting closing to a new customer, so they don't want to stop and have that conversation and sell that because they just want to close the MRR, and that's the most important thing. I understand that mentality as well. So they don't specifically charge for these things, or some of them. That would be 85 out of, we have 284 answers. You guys are doing it right now. Great job. I'm going to have a hard time keeping the math in my head, though. You know, interesting, there's only 5 of you that say this, but it's interesting because when I go to conferences and I talk about it, it seems like there's always people that will come up with this point of view, and I think that it's an understandable point of view. I can relate to it, being a person that's been out there and sold deals that says we get kickback on selling these and don't specifically charge for them because the market demands them to not be included. We probably, all of us that do like sell an assessment or sell onboarding or sell or charge for offboarding, have customers said, why are you charging me to set you up? I just signed up for 10 grand a month. What's the deal here, right? And so there's 5 out of the 291. Man, this number's moving quite fast. And then I specifically asked, which of these 3 do you actually charge for? Cool to see what everybody else is doing, right? So as of right now, 68 of 293 charge for new client assessments at the beginning. Whether you do it before you sell the managed service deal or after, but you charge for it, is immaterial from my perspective of charging and profit and risk, right? We charge for onboarding. We're at 144 of 299. So we get about 50% of you do, 50% of you don't. And then we charge for onboarding. The lowest number, offboarding, the lowest number, we're at 52 of 302. So that's an interesting fact. So I'm excited for Tim to talk about charging for offboarding. I'll just give you my quick is get in your MSA, and why not? You know, it can be expensive and time consuming. All right, so let's get into the philosophy on the business side of this a little bit more. You probably already picking up a little bit about where I said on the charge, not charge, all that kind of thing. We maintain 50% labor gross margin on all labor. That's just a rule. We're in this business to make money, and I know that if I don't do at least 50%, I'm actually not making money. Labor gross margin, in my opinion, for my business anyway, is the most important number that indicates the health of my business. And if that's not 50%, we are losing. Now, where do I really want it? Let's say 55, 56, 57. That's where the best in class are sitting. And different things might get different levels of margin, but I'm talking across the board. That's where I want it to be. And so if you took, in cybersecurity, the employees cost different. In different areas, you can pay different amounts. Sometimes we have brand new level 1 techs starting in the low 40s. Sometimes they're in the 50s, depending on location. We have some that are in the 90s, like in our San Francisco office, just brand new. That's the rate. It's crazy. And so I just took the example of a round number. Like, what if your employee was $100,000? What is that going to cost you? Well, that's maps out to $48.08 an hour. Then you add in the overhead cost, a 1.2 multiplier to pay for their vacation and pay for their benefits and their taxes that you pay for them. That's $62.50 an hour. And then, you have to figure out how to do this math, but I just know that my tool cost is around $25 an hour after it spreads out across. It's not really sold by the hour, so you have to do some extrapolation to make that happen. So my total cost of goods, before I'm even thinking about sales, administration, marketing expenses to then get me to my net profit number, it's $87.50 an hour. So minimum bill rate needs to be $175 an hour. We usually are going to market between $195 and $225, depending on the geography. That's kind of just our standard hourly rate. Now, we actually charge more for other things. We don't charge the same hourly rate for everything, and that's been a relatively new change for us. For a long time, we're just the same rate, kind of no matter what. And so, if you're not at least charging $175 and you have employees that cost this kind of thing in tool costs like this, then you're probably not making money. And so when you have somebody spend 30, 40 hours on an onboarding and you're not charging for it, you can really quickly add up what the math is. And if you add 10, 12, 15, 30, 40 customers in a year, you can put a real big number on that. And that's where I think you just got to think through the math of what you're doing. Here's the other thing. Why not? I mean, yeah, somebody might say, I don't want you to, but I just like the letter tell us you don't want this, it's about that easy to get somebody over the hump on an onboarding charge or an assessment charge or on an offboarding. And so, although I will say if you're offboarding, you want to have had that conversation when you sold them in the MSA. When they're offboarding, they're not going to want to, but you already have an agreement in place saying that's how it works, right? So our onboarding process template, the basic one, the one I provided in the example that says the tasks we do. Now, it's all the high-level tasks in there, but you can see generally, hey, here's where we hit this, here's where we document this, here's where we do this. Every one of those has an SOP with procedures underneath it. So it's not like we just provide the technician with this high-level overview, but I'm showing you kind of the areas of where we go with it, if that makes sense. But that base one, when we say onboarding template apply, before we do anything to it to customize it to that client, it's 43 hours. So we see a new customer is taking 43 hours up front. Well, I don't know how that sits with anybody. I'll see if I can see. Does anybody feel like that's high? Or anybody feel like that's low? So everybody feels like it's exactly right? What was that? A little low. Okay, great. All right, interesting. Yeah. And so, and the reality of it is once we customize it, who knows where it will land? It depends on the customer, right? But I'm talking and we don't take a lot of the customers of this size, not many come our way, a 20-person, marketing company, 43-hour assessment, that's going to be a big number for them from what they're used to or what they think. And so that's part of the sales exercise is to help them understand what it costs and what we're doing. But I would argue that, look, I'm more willing to put effort in the front to sell it, to get it, make sure I'm maintaining margin, but also to get a really great onboarding. Why do I want a really great onboarding? Why do I want it to be secure? Why do I want it to be effective? Is it going to get better later? Are you going to actually be able to stretch it out and have a better experience if you kind of do a few things part way. In my experience, we just never seem to get that back. And so starting off right is the big key. And it's a big reason to it. We do make sure we customize all of our scopes when we do this. We have our templates, we have our starting points, we have our guidelines, our guideposts, but we always apply to the specific customer for all of these things and have unique scopes per. So I thought something would be fun to talk about. You know, different companies have different team designs, different ways that they're built. We have a dedicated project team that has a project manager, and we have a department lead, and we have engineers and technicians within it, a few of them anyway. And so they do the overall management of our assessments, our onboarding, and our offboarding as a project. We have VCIO role as well, which I'm sure many of you do, and they are delegated the documentation and the SOP production of the onboarding. We always make sure that at minimum there's 5 processes written completely uniquely, well, not complete, we start with base ideas because not every client, well, I'll just back that up. We should start with 5 processes that we make sure at minimum SOPs we're going to write to make sure they fit that customer's unique need. And that's the hire fire processes and their patching policy. Hire fire being new computer, new user, user termination, computer equipment decommission. All things that there's like, this client might want you to do this with the mailbox. This client might want you to do this with their documents. This client might want you to recycle with a certificate of destruction. Maybe this one doesn't care about that, you know, so forth, so on. And so there's little choices they can all make. And when you're onboarding, they're gonna have their own set of applications, their own departments, all these kind of things. And so that's where we're building that, is in our onboarding process. We're writing these SOPs that then set up our team for success. So no matter who gets that next new user onboarding, they've got the steps to take. It's laid out very thoroughly, and off we go. I'll add one other key element to that too that we figured out a long time ago. We used to just create web forms for clients. Now we're using our RPA tool that creates forms per client, where we actually build it out so that the customer has a really specific, unique to them interface where they can get in and they say, hey, you know, I need a new person in this department, and they're going to start this date, and here's their name, and here's their supervisor, and here's the applications we know they're going to need, and because you've already said it's this department, the template's already there, and so they're just going to add if there's anything different or changed about it, so forth, so on. And so we really put a lot of effort into giving the customer a very easy web form tool customized to them that makes sense to them, where they can tell us exactly what needs to happen by when and for who. And that gives us a lot of success in our process because we don't have to have that Wimbledon back and forth of like, what's the start date? Oh, what was their phone number? You know, you said that they have this email, but somebody else has an email like that. You want to change? All that Wimbledon gets set by a good upfront form. And then I will say the other secret sauce is that a lot of that onboarding stuff has now been just automated, not a person doing it. And so even though we're still charging for things, it's done a lot of things without a person. So the VCIO does that work of setting up those procedures and processes and other ones that might be identified as necessary for that customer. Gets a lot into the uniquenesses of the applications. Our account managers, they do a customer training and introduction event. It's a full, we have like a templated slide deck for it where we tell them how to enter a tech ticket, what they're going to expect during the onboarding process, during any remediation, what does service look like, how does after hours work, who are the team members that you're going to be talking to, and we take them through a whole introduction. We ask to meet with their entire company if we can, or at least their entire management team when we do that. And we'll sometimes say, hey, we'll provide lunch, we'll just do it during your lunch. But this is something we're doing sometimes multiple times because the customer's that big or they have multiple locations, but it's all about how do you get a really great start so that they're excited about it, they're all informed, they all know what they're doing. And then the back office, they're assigned, the folks who do the admin work, they have the job of making sure the paperwork's filed correctly in the right place. They set up the billing so that the automatic billing goes. The agreement's set up into our PSA, routine ticket templates. We have many of them, like things like, hey, here's when the QBR fires, here's when we do the audit of this, here's when we do the audit of that, and here's when we have this meeting. All those are ticket templates that they just get fired up and scheduled for a year at a time as we go. So those are some things about the who runs onboarding. Okay, let me see how I'm doing it. I think they told me talk for 40 minutes and then questions, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker here. So just a couple things on perspective. Is the customer really objecting to the dollar amount when they're objecting to an assessment or an onboarding or an offboarding? I would contend no. What they're objecting to is they don't see the value of it. And so that's where you should think, how do I show them what this value is? Would you really want to have a partially done onboarding, not tell your team about it, and just get it going, and then hopefully it gets better as you go, right? And then how do we handle objections? Really, that's just a matter of training and spending some time, writing down what somebody said, talking over the team. What's a great way to answer that question? What type of customers are the ones who don't pay for assessments and onboarding anyway? I will tell you this. One thing I really like about our selling assessment model before we sell them full-on managed services is I feel like we're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing us. And if they're the kind of client that doesn't want to do that or is going to throw up those objections, I feel like we're dodging a bullet if we don't bring them on as a client, because that's the client that will argue with every invoice that you can never satisfy, that is going to have every problem, that's later going to leave in some weird fury, and you really didn't do anything wrong. They just simply, that's their normal behavior. So I would argue a client that doesn't want these things might be one that you may not want. At least that's my point of view. Another thing I thought would be helpful to talk about, as a company, one of the things I'm really fond of, and we could talk about this if you ever want to, on the side, we've been running on EOS traction for a long time. That's really helped me in how we build out our management team. And I think that's also led us to doing a lot of Kaizen stuff, like the gentleman that started this morning, talking about the third rule of effective teams. Always constantly improving. And so, by the way, you can tell I'm an amazing graphic artist. Calm down, all right? It's incredible. I was trying to say, how could I do it so these things are feeding into something? And I tried it with AI, and it was a total mess. And it kept misspelling things that were spelled correctly. I was like, all right, I'm not even doing this. So I just did a stupid org chart diagram. But what I wanted to share with you is that one thing I think is the real key to this is if you like your onboarding today and you think it's perfect, great. I would argue that it won't be in a year from now unless you keep it up, maintain it, so forth, so on. But the reality is if you feel like your onboarding is not great now, maybe you can take a few ideas from here, maybe ask around, have some good conversations for other folks here at the community, get a few ideas. The bigger thing is document it, write it down, get it there, and then have a constant improvement process. That was our secret. It wasn't a matter of we came up with the most amazing idea. We learned most of it from asking people like yourself. But then what did we do to make it better as we go? Well, we're a SOC 2 Type 2 attested organization, so we have a risk management program, and so we hold quarterly risk meetings. And if we come up with something, we say, oh, we need to make sure customers never have that. Oh, go put it in the onboarding template. Let's make sure we get that up front, or let's make sure that's in the assessment, so we're looking for that so we know to put it in the onboarding project when we get there. After projects, we do after-action reviews. We do, in the EOS system, you'll call a weekly meeting an L10 meeting, right? So you might have heard of the term. And so somebody might bring up an issue and say, hey, this is happening. I think this is an issue. We should probably fix this. So that can feed in an update to our process or our templates. We have quarterly strategy meetings as a leadership team where we talk about the things that we need to do, the most important things of the company over this next quarter, over the next year, over the next 3 years. And that can feed changes to our process and our projects, and it does on a regular basis. And then, of course, there's always the ever-important customer feedback. Like, for instance, there isn't an onboarding project that we don't ask for an NPS and feedback on at the end of. Or in other ways that we ask, like in QBRs, we ask for a rating as well. And anything that comes up, we'll look to bring it back to whatever process can be improved. So I think that for us, the Kaizen process means that we're always paying attention in all the ways that we get this information, and then we're finding a place to write it down so that we don't forget it. And then it finds its way into a template. That template that we have that's 43 hours at base, of course it changes per customer as we go, it originally started about 25. And 43 is where we're at today, and it's only because we just think, oh, we should make sure to add this. We don't want to forget that. Okay, so start thinking of all your good questions. I'm sure you have many, or disagreements. I'm open for that too. Why do we approach onboarding this way? Why do we think about onboarding this way? Upfront thoroughness and success in an amazing onboarding is the #1 way to lead to long-term profitability and customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction can mean risk less to me. A happier customer is a less risky customer. In fact, that's like something we have as a practice, that we have a list of every customer who we think is at risk, and we know the dollar amount, so we're always watching that. And we make sure our team knows, right, if we think there's a customer at risk. And it could be simple things like our point of contact change. How many times does a new CIO come in and suddenly they want to bring in their own team? What do you got to do? Well, that's a risky moment, right? But anyway, if you're upfront and thorough, If you do the best way to start it off, you're going to lead to greater long-term success. So being process-driven, having an effective and comprehensive process, and I'll just tell you right now, from my perspective, I don't see any reason why not to sell it as well and be paid for it as well. If a customer doesn't want to start off right, in my opinion, it doesn't ever get better. To be thorough and complete, we have many team members doing specific roles. We can't pay for those roles if we don't charge for it. So that's my business thoughts on that, if that makes sense. So with that being said, we have a few minutes for Q&A. If people have questions, please come on up. That's where we're at. Robert, enter stage left.
Is it the left? It's the left, I guess. Great job.
So I don't know. Stage right? I don't know.
Excellent job. I'm sure we have some questions out there. I know we have some questions out there. I'm checking the microphones. I don't see any. There were a couple online that I saw, which I'll get to in a minute.
Okay.
But I just wanted to share some personal thoughts with you.
Please.
As I was listening to you, because you really struck a chord with me. We're actually in the process of re-engineering our entire onboarding process for the umpteenth time.
Yeah.
I don't know, I lost count of versions. I'm actually thinking of just doing the year .1 and .2 and even force us to just evaluate it periodically. Yeah. If any of you are, I'm sure you all have an onboarding project template or process.
Hopefully you at least have something.
Right? And so I just love this idea of Kaizen, continuous improvement. I'm an General Electric employee where we did a lot of continuous improvement. So all that strikes a chord with me very well. I think we do actually have a question out there. So please, sir.
All right, somebody's got their hand up. All right.
Yeah, thanks a lot for all the insight. It was very good. Question is, when you're doing a pre-sales assessment, what kind of tools are you using that don't need to get installed on the computers or that are less invasive than doing that, so you don't have to deal with the removal of those tools?
Yeah, great question. So our main scanning tools that we use, we run them on a PC that we drop in the customer's location. So it's running on our equipment in their location for those assessments. That's the number one way to solve that problem. We do ask for things like administrative access. Generally, we're able to do everything we want the firewall with a read-only access, so we ask for that. We always just ask for the least required. But we're able to get pretty good scans, pretty good information once we have authenticated scanning going. And then we also do unauthenticated to see how that shows up too. So.
Did we get your question? Okay, great, thanks. I'm going to pull a question.
There is
another one? Oh, I'm sorry, that was the second person. It's
so
bright up here.
It's really hard to see from here, so just...
go ahead.
So my question is, after you have a paid assessment sold and you're on your way, you spoke about doing interviews with the employees of that company. Can you share a little bit about those type of questions and maybe the value that derives?
Yeah, so we're asking questions like, hey, if you, we'll ask simple questions. Sometimes we're looking for how their IT procedure works. So we'll say, hey, if you have an IT problem, how do you ask for help? What's that process look like? And what's the normal response look like? And how often is that solved in one time versus multiple times? So we're asking questions to figure out how their service is working, to give that back to them, but it also helps us know where they have strengths and weaknesses. We're also asking questions about what do you wish IT did for you? What do you start, stop, or keep doing? Those are very classic questions. And so when you're talking to like a business owner, it's a very different set of answers. That's why we like to get a scope of different people in the organization, from the frontline worker to maybe our point of contact or an administrative person to a decision maker, owner type people. And it is questions about what they think is missing in IT, what they think could be better, what they think they're going to be doing. But we're also asking a lot of the questions very similar to what Brian Blakely does. And it really makes me think, like, how many of those can I move into before we sell the assessment too? But it's questions like, how do you make money? Tell us what your major offerings are. Tell us how the departments are divided. Can you share an org chart with us? There's a lot of things we're doing to try to learn everything we can about them, to then give them a very personalized point of view that speaks their language and does give them a very unique. Because a big thing about the assessment when you're going to sell managed services later, a lot of reasons why you have a high close rate after assessment is because you're speaking directly to them and directly with evidence to their need. So.
All right, I'm going to pick a question online here.
Okay, thanks.
So, what tools do you use for your assessment? So, like, what kind of specific things are there? Are they homegrown tools? Are they off-the-shelf things, a combination?
We're using off-the-shelf thing. I say grab me later to talk specific brands, because I'm not here to like go, this is vendor neutral, right? So grab me later, I'm happy to share specifically what we use. But I'll tell you this, it's network scanning, vulnerability scanning, it's Office 365, scanning abilities to let us know things like security permissions, licensing, and then we're using a tool that helps us collect up all of our answers in a way that also can lead to the same kind of baseline into QBRs like I referred to earlier. So I'm going to hold the really specific questions for a personal conversation.
Okay.
Or just email me, just follow up. Yeah, got another
Question out there, yep.
I have two questions. First, when you started requiring payment for the assessment, how many of your competitors were doing the same thing?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. So, our whole point of view of the assessment is it's like, I could sell you generic IT. I could come in here without looking at you and not really know anything about you and tell you I just know everything about IT. And that way, I know that you're going to be, $250 a user a month, and we'll onboard you for a couple of months worth of fee. That's a really common play, and I think it works for many. I would say that it has a lot of margin danger, if anything else. And so I just refer to that. It's like, hey, this is what they do. In fact, I like to say in my initial meetings, we're probably going to be the most expensive partner you're talking to. But I'll tell you right now, we provide the greatest amount of value. So what kind of IT do you want? What would you want me to take off the table? Would you want somebody to come in here and do just enough to sell you something? Or would you want somebody to come in here to give you a legitimate assessment that you can use and take to every IT company you talk to as the standard? Now you know what to ask, and you know what your problems are, and now you're going to be armed to make the best decision. Those are just examples of how I'd handle that objection.
That's awesome. So part of that then too, what's the percentage of someone paying for an assessment not going with you?
Yeah, close rate's above 80%.
I think we got one question out
Hey,
over
Karl.
here. Yep.
What's up? I think that's you, right, Keith?
Yeah, that's
All
me.
right,
It's Keith.
It is a little hard to see with the lights.
So when you're going in with onboarding, how often are you doing projects and ending up with remediation type projects
Almost always.
for major issues that are running in parallel?
Yeah.
with that
Sometimes
onboarding?
they're major security issues, so you have to think of doing it even at the beginning. Our general hard rule is to onboard first and then start remediation. Sometimes we don't get that luxury, which is very unfortunate. So we do a lot of preparation with the customer mindset about the mistakes and the things we don't know yet as we're trying to fix as we go. The classic, fixing the airplane's engine while it's flying kind of stuff. But generally our process is, our onboardings are usually scoped to about 2 to 3 weeks. And it's just about some very basic things. And almost always we've sold an assessment, we've sold an onboarding, and we've sold a remediation project that kicks off after onboarding, except in rare circumstances where we have to break that rule because of urgent need.
Okay, so are you using any method to prioritize, I guess, what that business impact is and how fast you spin up those projects?
Yeah. Our primary tool is to get it out in the roadmap and then conversation with the customer about priorities. But we come with our suggestions, and our assessment deliverables list them in order of priority when we give our findings and our recommendations. It's in priority order. And so that helps with that conversation. But then sometimes the customer, if we talk about it, we might shift or change. But remember, part of our deliverable, I can only briefly mention, it's at least a 2-year roadmap. And so we're going to have a lot of things on the table to be talking about. And so when we're doing that assessment delivery proposal part, that's a lot of that conversation is what order would we go?
Good stuff, Karl.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, so just maybe one little quick question here, and then a comment. So how senior are the technicians in the onboarding process? So you spoke about the tools.
Great question.
Right?
Great question.
And so what level of technician do you need to complete those?
I think our philosophy of the best onboarding possible still maintains, and so we actually put our highest level technicians on onboarding and assessment.
Right, because you want to make sure that...
We want the best documentation, the most things observed, the most experience provides the best result.
And
now other people can help with little tasks. They can delegate, I'm going to deploy this out, or I'm going to drop this thing off and plug it in. But ultimately, it's run by our highest level engineers.
Got it. So they may choose to
they might add bits and delegation out.
Right. And since I know that you're such a go-giver...
Oh, yeah, hey, what's up?
Okay, so someone had asked questions about, hey, do you have checklists for onboarding that you can share, or at least some bits and pieces? I think you're...
Yeah.
You'll have some documents.
Yeah, so in my takeaway, I'm giving basically our high-level description of our onboarding template, both the one that we do with the technical team and for our back office, like the things we want them to check off. Now, there are SOPs in there, but I am totally happy to share it. I would just say you got to hit me up for that specifically, because how could I dump all of that out to everybody? I just don't even know how that would make sense. But you're more than welcome to reach out to me via email, LinkedIn, hit me up. Happy to have a conversation. I have actually freely given out policies and procedures before. Happy to do
Awesome. Thank you so much. How about a big round of applause for Karl?
it. Thank you. I'm out.